She was hammering a broken gate with child. The silent rancher offered her more than shelter. The first blow slipped and near took her with it. The hammerhead glanced off rusted iron, bit splintered wood, bounced, and the gate lurched back toward her belly. Rio Seco Flats, New Mexico Territory, August 1875. The noon sun hard and white overhead, heat crawling off the packed yard. Ruth Dalton, 25, with child enough that her faded brown dress pulled tight across her middle, stood braced against a warped corral gate, both hands wrapped in strips of old sheet, swinging at a hinge that should have been replaced a year ago. The gate guarded the only good well for 10 miles. The first thing her husband had built before a winter cough took him under 3 blankets and left her with nothing but thin soil, 3 sorry cows and a baby turning slow under her ribs. From the road came the low rumble of hooves. A neighbor's herd pushed along the flats, dust lifting, voices heard but not yet words. That sound always put a knot in her throat now. Too many men measuring her fences with their eyes. The brindled lead steer on her side of the fence backed up, took aim, drove his shoulder into the gate just as she brought the hammer down. Wood shuddered, iron shrieked. The top hinge tore loose, the whole weight of the gate slammed into Ruth's chest. She stumbled, boots sliding, breath knocked sideways, one arm flying out to keep herself from falling flat on her stomach. Something sharp jabbed low in her back. The child within gave a hard, offended kick. She grabbed the gate with both hands on pure, stubborn reflex, dug her heels in, held, even as the steer shoved again, smelling freedom and green in the yard beyond. Dust bit her eyes. "No," Ruth rasped, voice hardly there. The steer did not care what she said. Hoofbeats separated from the herd sound, a single rider turning off the road toward the yard, the bay gelding cutting across scrub with easy, steady strides. Wyatt Hale, 34, broad-shouldered, rangy from years in the saddle, old army coat faded by sun and storms, dropped his weight in the stirrups, took in the scene in one slow sweep. The pregnant woman braced against a broken gate, the slamming brute of a steer, the way the chain hung loose where the post had rotted through. Men in town called him the Silent One from Mesa Arroyo, a rancher who came down for supplies twice a month and rarely spent more than 10 words on anyone. A man who had ridden scouts for the cavalry and come back quieter than he had gone. He said nothing now. He swung down before the bay fully stopped, boots hitting dirt in a long stride, grabbed the trailing chain with his left hand, slammed his right shoulder into the sagging boards alongside Ruth's smaller frame, the impact jarring his teeth. The gate jumped, but no longer lurched free. The steer hit again. Wyatt's back took the blow, muscles locking, grit grinding under his heels. He grunted once, low, teeth bared, held. Ruth caught a breath that tasted of iron and dust. Danger beat too came quick. Another steer pressed up behind the first, both animals crowding, the warped post at the far side groaning, lean wood bending, the whole line one bad shove from spilling cattle into her yard and over her if she dropped. "Step aside," Wyatt said, voice even, not loud. Ruth's pride rose before her sense. "If I let go, it goes," she snapped, jaw tight, fingers burning. "I'm not letting go," he answered. Something in the calm of it cut through the panic. She shifted a fraction, enough to get one hand free, the other still wedged against the splintered rail to keep herself upright. Her back screamed. The child turned again, reminding her that stubbornness had limits. Wyatt used the space. With one arm and his whole weight braced on the gate, he jerked his chin toward his horse. "Back, Duke," he called. The bay, used to that tone, backed 3 hard steps, rope tied from his horn to the leaning post snapping tight, adding another anchor. The gate steadied, stopped jumping, turned solid beneath Ruth's hand. Wyatt spared her one quick glance. "Pin," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Anything iron that fits a hinge," he clarified. Her mind caught up. Ruth dropped to one knee, the movement nearly folding her from the cramp in her side, groped in the dust for the fallen pin, closed her wrapped fingers around cold metal, shoved it up into his reach. Their knuckles brushed, both slick with sweat and dirt, his skin rough with old rope scars, hers torn fresh. He drove the pin home with the heel of his palm, the sound a dull thud over the snorting cattle, then hooked the chain higher on the sound part of the post, wrapped it twice, jerked it tight. The lead steer rammed one more time, found less give, shook his head, snorted his frustration, then backed away, attention already shifting to the herd drifting along the road. Breath moved through the yard again. Wyatt eased off the gate a fraction, waited, tested, then stepped straight back, hands dropping to his sides. Ruth stayed braced a second longer, muscles slow to believe the help, then peeled herself away from the boards, one hand going automatically to her belly, thumb rubbing the hard curve through threadbare cotton. "You all right?" Wyatt asked, tone flat but eyes sharp, berries brown, shadowed by the line of his hat. Ruth swallowed. "Back took a knock," she said. "Baby's letting me know he dislikes bulls and hinges both, but we are standing." She hated that her voice shook on the last word. Wyatt's gaze flicked to her wrapped fingers, the dark spots where blood had already soaked through, the loose plank leaning off the far post, the thinness of her arms. "Gate won't last the week," he said, simple. "Neither will my patience, if every man in these flats rides in to tell me what won't last," she answered. The herd on the road streamed past now, dust rising in curtains, voices carrying. Someone laughed, someone else hollered goodbye, not at her. Wyatt pushed his hat back an inch, revealing a pale ridge of scar along his hairline that disappeared into his temple. "Not here to tell," he said. "Came because the road shows fresh drag marks from your yard, and the well rope is cut short. Figured something broke." "You study everybody's yard from up on your ridge," Ruth said, half accusation, half genuine question. "Just the ones with a broken gate and a woman with child leaning on it," he replied. Her cheeks heated. From anger or sun she could not tell. "I can manage my own boards," she said, Mr. Hale. He had not offered his name yet, but she knew it. Everyone knew every brand on this stretch of country. "Maybe," Wyatt said, "until the next hinge goes and the next bull tries it, and there's no one on the road in time." The baby kicked again, sharp, as if agreeing. Hoofbeats broke the standoff. A sorrel stallion with two shiny tack trotted up, throwing dust for show. Cass McCready, the man who held half the notes from the little town and all the water rights upstream, pulled his horse in at the gate, smirk already on his lips. "Now this is a picture," Cass drawled. Widow Dalton and the Mesa ghost, both propping up the same rotten lumber. Ruth's spine stiffened. "Ride on, Cass," she said, though her legs trembled. "Can't," he answered, swinging a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Brought business. This gate may not last, but this ink will." Wyatt shifted half a step closer to the post, between Cass's horse and Ruth, not touching her. "Just there. Whatever you're selling," Wyatt said, "she's sweating enough for one day." "See that?" Cass chuckled. "Silent Ranch has found a tongue." He waved the paper. "I hold Jude's markers," Cass told Ruth. 3 months he missed, then he went and died, rude of him. Leaves me with only one way to get my coin back, this land, this well, these cows. Unless you like the taste of jail beans. Ruth's stomach clenched. "Note's not due till harvest," she said. "Preacher read it for us." Cass' smile thinned. "Preacher doesn't hold it," he said. "I do, and I say the line moved up. Ink allows it. Little word at the bottom named foreclosure." Wyatt watched Ruth's fingers curl, saw the way her eyes flicked to the far cottonwoods where Jude's small wooden cross leaned, saw the tightness around her mouth. "You came with a loaded paper and no other offer," Wyatt said. "Bad manners in this heat." Cass's gaze shifted to him, dismissive. "You planning to buy her out?" he asked. "That it, Hale, ride down from your quiet ridge and scoop a widow, drag her up to that stone pen you call a house, give her shelter and silence? Is that the plan?" The words more taunt than question. Wyatt's jaw worked once. "I don't buy people," he said, "and I don't take land from those still holding it." "Then stay out of a deal that isn't yours," Cass snapped, tugging his horse's head, already bored with the push. He dropped the paper at Ruth's feet. 3 days, he said. Then Marshall gets involved. Dust swirled as he turned and trotted away, the paper soaking slowly into the dry yard like spilled water. Ruth stared at it, anger and fear and stubbornness wrestling in her chest, the baby rolling restless. Wyatt bent, picked the paper up, did not unfold it, just weighed it in his hand. "He's right about one thing," Ruth said quietly. "I can't pay the note. Not since the blight took half the crop, not with no savings left and Dr. Bill's behind." She lifted her chin. "But he's wrong if he thinks I'll crawl to his porch and ask for a cot in his cookhouse. This land is the only thing Jude left that wasn't a half bottle or a half truth. Wyatt turned the paper over once, as if the back might show another ending, then folded it smaller, slipped it into his coat. "Let me see it," she protested. "Later," he said, "in shade with water when you're not swaying on your feet." Only then did she realize how tight her fingers dug into her own forearm, how loud her pulse sounded. "I'm not swaying," Ruth said. His eyes said he disagreed. "Bench on your porch looks sturdy," Wyatt replied, tone still level. "Walk there, sit. I'll look at the ink, then speak plain what can be done." It startled her, that word done spoken like something that existed, not a fantasy. She hesitated, then nodded once, pride bending but not breaking. The next hour moved in a straight line. She sat on the porch bench, skirts hitched a little to ease the pull on her back, a chipped glass of well water sweating in her hands, the child finally settling into a slow roll instead of a kick. Wyatt stood with one shoulder against the post, hat off now, paper open, eyes moving silently across the cramped handwriting. "Preacher read most of it true," he said at last, "but Cass slid in a clause at the end, gives him right to call the debt early if the value of his collateral is in jeopardy." "What's that mean?" Ruth asked. "Means he can pretend your broken fences risk his investment," Wyatt answered, "and Marshall Clay will have to listen if it comes to court." "Court I can't afford," Ruth murmured. Wyatt folded the note again. "There's another law," he said. "One Cass counts on folks forgetting." She looked up sharply. "What law married couples in this territory can join holdings?" Wyatt said, watching her face. "Make one spread in two names. Makes it harder for men like Cass to pull one piece without the whole mess getting tangled with a judge." The air shifted between them. "That sounds like you offering shelter," Ruth said, words careful. "And more than shelter, Mr. Hale." His gaze did not waver. "It's an offer," he said, "not a command and not a cage. I have land up Mesa Arroyo, good grass, clean spring, more work than one man can hold. You have this yard, this well, a child coming, and a paper that will drown you if you stand in it alone." Her laugh came out cut short. "You expect me to marry a man who barely speaks 10 words in a row?" she asked, "when the last one I had wouldn't shut his mouth long enough to hear a warning." Wyatt's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Speaking didn't save my brother from the plains," he said quietly. "Silence didn't either, but silence keeps me from saying things I can't back with my hands." Ruth studied him, the lines around his eyes, the sun-browned skin, the quiet strength of someone who did the thing first and named it second. "Suppose I say yes today," she said. "Folk will say I took you for your acres. You took me for a wet nurse and a cook." "Folk talk regardless," Wyatt answered. "Only questions that matter are whether you keep your land and whether that child has roof and water when Cass comes back with a marshal." She dropped her gaze to her swollen hands. "Shelter is one thing," Ruth whispered. "But if I sign, I won't be kept in some back room. I won't have you making choices over my head like Jude did. I hammer my own gates, Mr. Hale, even when they fall on me." "Then we hammer them together," he said, simple, or not at all. The silent rancher had just offered more than shelter, had placed his land, his name, his daily life on the same table as her fear. She breathed once, slow. "My name goes beside yours on any paper," she said, "never under." "Agreed," Wyatt replied, without a flicker. "And the baby carries both brands," she added. "Dalton and Hale, there's strength in two names." "Also agreed," she raised her eyes. "Then ride me to town tomorrow," Ruth said, "before I lose my nerve or this child decides to arrive early in the yard." He nodded once, that small dip of his chin that meant whole decisions. Danger shifted, not gone, but now shared. They married in the back of the sheriff's office the next morning, bright light slanting through dusty glass, Marshall Clay, a reluctant witness, Cass McCready watching from the boardwalk with a face like curdled milk, papers stamped, names joined, notes' teeth dulled by law. But ink did not tame weather. The long middle danger came out of the sky 2 weeks later. Clouds piled black over the far mesa in the late afternoon, wind hot and wrong, lightning crawling sideways, the smell of dry sage and something sharper. Wyatt stood at the new gate he had hung with Ruth, testing the swing, when he saw the first thin line of smoke on the ridge beyond Cass's upper pasture. "Brush fire," he said, and his voice was not quiet now. Ruth stepped up beside him, baby low, back aching from a day of bending over wash. Smoke thickened into a plume, wind pushing it toward their creek, toward their corral, toward everything they had just wired together with ink and trust. "Cassie's men will fight it," she said, "maybe more hope than belief." "Wind's wrong," Wyatt replied, already moving toward the barn. "It'll outrun any half-hearted bucket line." He threw bridles on the bay and on Ruth's old dun mare, thrust a soaked bandana into her hand. "Tie it over your mouth," he ordered, "and you stay in the yard near the well. If embers fall, you soak the roof. You don't run toward the hill." "This is my land too," she shot back. "And my land's upwind," he said. "If fire jumps, you'll be ringed in. I need you where water is and where you can move slow, not on a slope that will break your legs and steal the baby's breath." She almost argued, but the look in his eyes was sharp, not dismissing. "Measuring risk, you'll need help," she said instead. He tossed her another bandana. "Then yank that bell rope," he said. "Clay will see smoke from town. He'll bring whoever can swing a shovel." Then he was astride the bay, heels in, galloping toward the dark smear on the ridge, coat flapping, hat low against the heat already rolling. Ruth stood a heartbeat longer, hand on the gate they had mended, the child turning restless as if feeling the coming heat. Then she moved. Water in buckets, bandana over face, bell rope in hand. She yanked until the clang rang off adobe walls miles away, then hauled herself up the outside ladder to the low roof, muscles screaming, to spread wet gunny sacks along the shingles. The fire reached Cass McCready's range first. From the roof, Ruth watched a line of orange race through dry grass, watched tiny figures on the far hill beating at it with branches, powerless against the wind driving flame toward the draw that funneled straight to her creek. Smoke rolled, bits of ash drifted like black snow. Her lungs burned even through the damp cloth. Down in the wash, Wyatt rode the line between two worlds, fire on his right, bare earth on his left, swinging down to ignite his own strip of dry grass. A backfire, something he had learned in army years when survival meant knowing how to burn one thing to save another. The flames he lit crawled toward the oncoming wall, met it, fought for air, the two lines devouring each other into thick smoke and confusion. His boots slid on the slope, sparks bit his sleeves. One ember landed on his forearm, skin hissing. He slapped it out, kept moving, lighting, retreating, calling to the bay with short, sharp sounds. Above, in the yard, embers finally found Ruth's roof, tiny red eyes landing on dry wood. She beat them out with a sopping cloth, breath sobbing, arms lead, the baby pushing hard against her spine. A gust took a sheet of burning grass off the ridge and hurled it down into the cottonwood stand by the creek, flame climbing bark in a second, smoke boiling. "No," Ruth whispered. Useless word. If the cottonwoods went, the bank would crumble, water would silt, their whole line would suffer. She clambered down, legs shaking, grabbed the rope tied to the big zinc washtub, sloshed water over the tree roots, then over her own skirts, then over anything cloth she could throw onto low flames sneaking across yard edge. Hooves thundered at last. Marshal Clay, two townsmen and Cass himself rode in, faces grey with smoke, eyes wide at the sight of flame licking the far bank. "We cut a line at the road," Clay called, "but wind shifted. We're losing it." Cass slid off his horse, took one look at his burning upper fence, his grazing herd panicking, then at the way Ruth stood between his precious creek and the fire, skirts soaked, hair plastered, back bowed over the child she carried. For a second his usual sneer filled his face, then something like shame shadowed it. "What do you need?" he asked, voice dry. "Men with shovels here, not up there," Ruth snapped, pointing to the creek. "Dig me bare earth from that cottonwood to the old barrel. I'll keep this side wet. Wyatt's up in the teeth with his own line if he's burned for it and we lose this place besides. I swear I'll haunt you and your cattle both." Cass blinked, then yanked his jacket off, grabbed a shovel from Clay's saddle, threw himself into the dirt like any hired man, whatever calculation he had about notes and deeds shoved aside by the urgency of raw heat. They dug, they beat, they coughed and cursed. On the slope, Wyatt felt the wind shift again, this time in their favor. The backfire he'd lit finally starving the main front of fuel, turning raging wall into ragged tongues dying on blackened soil. His burned arm throbbed, coat sleeve half singed, hair smelling of smoke, lungs scorched. But the sight of flames dying before reaching Ruth's yard put strength back in his legs. By dusk, the fire had eaten itself into exhaustion around their land, leaving only smouldering patches, char lines, and the occasional stubborn bush to stomp. Ash floated in the cooling air, sky gone strange purple. But the house still stood. The cottonwoods still held their leaves, the well-roof damp but not scorched. Wyatt rode in slow now. Shoulders bent, clothes blackened, face streaked where clean sweat had cut channels in soot. Ruth stood by the gate, one hand on her back, the other on the post. Bandana down now, lips cracked, eyes bright, smoke making them water. She took one look at his arm and hissed under her breath. "Burned," she said. "Nothing deep," he answered, voice rough. "Seen worse." "Not on my watch," she replied, already reaching for the small crock of salve Marta had left after the last visit. Cass McCready leaned on his shovel, chest heaving, soot on his once fine shirt, watching the exchange with something new in his face. "Your fire saved my herd," he said grudgingly to Wyatt. "Your woman here saved my water. Seems I misjudged the pair of you." "Not your place to judge," Ruth answered, but the bite had softened. Cass nodded once, tired, hat hanging from his fingers. "That note," he said slowly. "Judge in Santa Fe can argue it till snow comes, but after today, I'll not be the man folks say burned a widow off her land after she shielded mine. Keep the paper, Hale. See what you can make of it. I'll take my chances with what I've already got." He turned, climbed onto his horse, rode away with less swagger than he had brought. Silence returned, softer now, full of frogs starting up by the creek, embers popping, the creak of leather as Clay and his men drifted toward town. Ruth stepped closer to Wyatt, took his burned arm in both her wrapped hands, unwrapped the charcloth, spread cool salve over angry red skin, movements sure despite her exhaustion. "You told me once you don't speak much," she said, "but today the land shouted for you, every neighbor heard it." "They heard flame," Wyatt murmured, eyes on her face. "You heard more than that, and stayed anyway." The words hung between them, less smoky than the air. Morning came clear after a night of strange dreams and restless baby kicks. Sun rose on a blackened ring around their matched holdings, but the center held green, the well intact, the new gate standing straight, hinges unbent. Ruth walked the line slowly, one hand trailing along charred dirt, the other on the hard curve of her belly, Wyatt pacing beside her, arm bandaged, hat brim low. "Looks like a circle," she said, "as if someone drew it on purpose." "Line held," he answered. "We held it," she corrected. Weeks rolled forward in order, not skipping. Roof mended where stray embers had chewed at shingles. Fresh boards replaced the worst scorched fence posts. Grass began to push tiny green blades through black ash. The creek ran a little muddier for a while, then cleared. Ruth's child came on a bright, dry morning. Not in a storm, not in a panic, but with hard work and steady hands. Marta's cursing, Wyatt's quiet pacing outside, Boots wearing a path in the yard. A girl, squalling and furious, dark hair plastered, lungs like a town bell. Ruth laid her on her chest, smiled a crooked, exhausted smile. "Sarah Hale Dalton," she said. "So she knows she belongs to us and to herself." Wyatt stepped into the doorway, only when Marta jerked her chin that he could, eyes wider and softer than anyone had ever seen. He touched the baby's fist with one bandaged finger, watched it clamp down with the strength of a pup. Days later, news drifted that Cass had quietly sold part of his upstream rights to a railroad man and was talking more of trains than of fences now. His interest in Ruth's Creek faded under larger schemes. The ranch at Rio Seco Flats settled into a new rhythm, 2 adults at its center, 1 child growing loud and sure, weather still dangerous, debt still something to watch, but fear no longer the only thing at the gate. In the full light of a late autumn afternoon, Wyatt and Ruth stood by that same repaired gate, watching Sarah totter in the yard, hands out, cottonwoods bright along the water, the line of blackened land now only a memory. The story, looked at from some distance, was simple and solid. She had been the woman hammering a broken gate with child, too alone, too stubborn to step back even when the wood punched her breath away. A target for men who saw widows as easy marks. He had been the silent rancher on the ridge, carrying old scars and a wary heart, until the sight of her bracing against more than just lumber dragged him straight into her dust. Their dangers came honest in iron, debt, and fire, and each time they met them shoulder to shoulder, the promise of shelter growing into something broader, a partnership of land and name and work. In the end, more than one gate stood straight at Rio Seco. More than one brand shared the same line, and in the laughter of a child chasing chickens through safe yard dust, the country's hard edges seemed, for once, to soften into something like mercy. If this story moves you and brings to your heart love, subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales and tap the bell so you never miss another story from here.